Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to silverradio.fm. Available online at housestreet.com, talkdigitalnetwork.com. Welcome to silverradio.fm, podcasting in 0.99995. I'm Jim Goddard. My guest is John Rubino, author of several books on the economy, including The Money Bubble, his website, dollarcollapse.com. He's speaking to us near Port Angeles, Washington. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jim.
John, why silver over gold?
Well, silver has a couple of advantages over gold. Actually, several, but I'll stick to the biggest ones. One is denomination. Silver's way cheaper than gold. So an ounce of silver functions kind of like a $20 bill in the economy, whereas an ounce of gold is like a $1,000 bill. Much fewer uses for a $1,000 bill. You can use them, to buy a used car or something like that. You just whip out $10,000 or $20,000 bills and you can buy the car. Same thing with ounces of gold. But in most transactions, in the world to come, when maybe fiat currencies aren't working anymore, silver coins will have a lot more utility because they're smaller denomination. That's one. The other is the danger of confiscation. Gold, in living memory, has been banned in the United States. Back in 1934, FDR made it illegal to own gold and made it illegal to not give their gold back to the government for citizens back then. And then all the way till 1971, it was illegal to own gold. And that's less likely this time around because gold isn't the base money of the financial system, so it's not standing in the way of governments creating more currency. But still, the risk exists. With silver, no chance of that because it's an industrial metal as well as a monetary metal, so you can't ban it. So those are two advantages that are big enough to, I think, lead the average person to own a fair bit of silver.
How is the price of silver doing compared to other commodities?
Not so well lately. Iron ore, copper, aluminum, a bunch of others are up way more than silver, but that's a fairly temporary thing because silver has a lot of the same forces pushing it up as those other things, and those forces will kick into gear at some point in the future. So I think silver as an industrial metal, even if it wasn't a monetary metal, would still be expected over the long haul to go up along with other commodities. So we should expect to see that in the not too distant future. So silver ought to catch up to the other things in the industrial space.
Where does silver usually outperform in the commodity cycle?
Well, thinking of silver just as a commodity, they all tend to outperform towards the end of the process because after something's been going up for a year or two, people are still cautious. But after it's been going up for 5 or 6 or 7 years, they tend to extrapolate that into the indefinite future and pay pretty much anything to get a hold of something like copper or iron ore or silver. Just commodities tend to go up towards the end of their cycle. So we should expect silver to have its parabolic run whenever the commodities cycle peaks. It's nowhere near peaking yet. So that's still out there in the future waiting to happen.
How long can an inflation cycle last, and at what point in the cycle does silver tend to move substantially higher?
Well, think of an inflation cycle as basically the same thing as a commodity cycle because they tend to be affected by the same forces. If we're creating huge amounts of money and dumping it into the system as we are now, that will tend to make lots of things go up. And a lot of commodities will do what they're doing right now, which is to rise dramatically. And that causes inflation. So as long as commodities are going up, you've got inflation according to the common definition of that term. In other words, prices are rising. So silver will tend to have its parabolic move towards the end of that process for the same reasons I just mentioned about commodities. Even though now we're thinking of silver as a monetary metal in an inflationary environment, but it's basically the same psychological forces in the marketplace. People see it doing a certain thing year after year and assume it's going to do it forever, and they get excited and are willing to pay anything for it, and then it goes straight up for a while. Expect that out there at some indeterminate year in the future, but not in the really distant future. It's probably not too far away.
Do you see silver parallels between today and the 1970s?
I think that is the best part of the precious metals story right now, because the 1970s, and I am old enough to actually talk about this from memory, okay? I didn't have to read this. I lived through it. But the 1970s was a time in which the U.S. Suffered a major military defeat, which we handled badly. It made us look really bad. We had a government that didn't seem very competent, and people started to lose faith in it politically. We had a rising power in the form of the Soviet Union that looked like it was actually going to, beat us in geopolitics. And we had shortages of a lot of things that made their prices go way up. So does that sound kind of familiar? It should, because that's a lot of what's happening right now. And gold and silver had spectacular decades in the 1970s. They went up a little, more, and then they shot up. They did that parabolic move that I was talking about, where towards the end of the decade, they just went straight up for a while. Silver went from a few bucks an ounce earlier in the decade to $50 an ounce. And gold went from a few $100s to $800. So they had these spectacular moves towards the end when everybody was at peak panic. And we're in the early stages of that now, where we're just starting to lose faith in the government. And that may lead to us losing faith in the dollar. And if that happens, then here we go again, except the numbers are much bigger. So we should expect gold and silver to do more in nominal terms and percentage terms when things really get going.
At some point, will it make more sense to own silver instead of dollars? And then at another point further down the road, it'll make more sense to own dollars than silver?
Yeah, right now it's the silver instead of dollars time. We should be loading up on silver with our dollars, swapping out of fiat currency and into real money. There will come a time, though, when that parabolic move happens and silver actually gets overvalued relative to the fiat currencies of the world, assuming we don't just keep on inflating them away until they go to zero, in which case silver goes to infinity versus the dollar. But assuming we stop short of that point, there will come a time when it actually makes sense to sell your silver for dollars and then spend those dollars or whatever. And we're a long way from that time, but it's going to be fun. You and I hopefully will still be doing these shows so we can talk about it and start recommending people to take profits in silver. I'm looking forward to telling people that and actually to doing it myself. So it's coming. We don't know when, but that day will come, and hopefully we have a chance to gloat about it when it does.
For strength, should the U.S. petrodollar be backed by silver?
Well, the petrodollar story is almost over. The very short version of that is that we cut a deal with Saudi Arabia back in the 1970s in which we promised to protect them militarily in return for them only accepting dollars for OPEC's oil. That made the dollar this must-have currency all around the world because you needed it if you wanted oil, and everybody wanted oil, and so that helped the dollar become and then stay the world's reserve currency. But that's starting to change now. The dollar isn't nearly as well respected around the world as it was, and Russia and Saudi Arabia are cutting military cooperation deals, and China and Iran and Russia are playing a bigger role in the Middle East than the U.S. in some cases. So we're kind of being pushed out of the Middle East. At the same time that other countries are starting to use their own currencies increasingly for international trade. So you don't really need dollars the way you used to buy a lot of things in the world. And so the whole petrodollar as the world's reserve currency thing is a story that is kind of towards the end of its life cycle. So I don't think the idea of backing the petrodollar with silver makes a whole lot of sense right now, because the petrodollar is going the way of a lot of other failed currency concepts.
Where are we at in the seasonalities for silver?
Well, we're in a pretty good place. Silver and gold do have seasonal cycles, although you wouldn't think that they would, right? Because people could just anticipate them, and that would kind of smooth everything out. But Asian buying, because Asians like to give silver and gold as wedding presents, tends to ramp up towards the end of the year and early in the following year. So we're right at the beginning of the time seasonally when things usually pick up for gold and silver. If you look at a chart of gold's price, for instance, you see January is usually a really good month. It usually tends to go up in January. And that's because of that Asian buying. So we're heading into the time when the Asian buying is going to start ramping up. And that will probably, other things being equal, be good for silver and also for gold. So this is a time historically that if you had just loaded up on gold, silver, and related mining stocks, you would have made a lot more money than at any other time of the year.
What are some of the different ways to play silver?
Well, you can buy coins and bars, in other words, small denominations like 1 ounce. And you need to be careful with that, though, because the premiums, in other words, the markups on those things are sometimes outrageous. So you have to be careful. But if you can find some, for instance, right now, Canadian maple leaves, silver maples, are cheaper than silver eagles, the U.S. version, because the premiums are lower. So you would want to buy silver Canadian maple leaves rather than silver gold eagles right now. But just in general, that changes, so you never know. So you have to make sure you don't overpay for the silver that you get when you're buying coins. You can also buy mining stocks, which are basically silver in the ground. You know, you're paying, if you buy Pan American silver stock or something like that, you're basically buying the silver that they've discovered that's still in the ground and that they're going to dig up later and sell at presumably much higher prices. They can make you a lot more money in a bull market than gold and silver coins. Gold and silver coins are for protection. They are there to allow you to transact even in a world where dollars aren't very good for transacting anymore. In that sense, they protect your purchasing power. The mining stocks allow you to build capital because they can go up sometimes by many times what gold and silver do. And then the last thing you can do is buy ETFs, which are ways of owning gold and silver without actually going out and buying the coins and paying premiums and stuff like that. The one I would recommend for silver is PSLV. It's run by Sprott Asset Management in Canada, who most of your listeners will know well. But they seem to be doing the ETF thing well. They've got good covenants. It's much less likely that they will use their silver to manipulate the market than it is that SLV, which is basically managed by JP Morgan Chase, might do. You know, so buy PSLV. And that's a way of owning physical silver that's almost as safe as having it in hand at your house or whatever.
As an investor in silver, how have you weighted your silver portfolio?
I tend to just buy a lot of everything, but then I'm kind of an extreme case in this market. So, you know, I own a lot of physical silver stored in different places, and most of the big silver mining stocks and a bunch of the smaller ones and some of the ETFs. For the average person, you probably want to do it sequentially, where you buy some silver coins first. You get that out of the way. So that's the bedrock of your financial portfolio. You make sure they're stored in a safe place. And then with the money that you still have, you move on to riskier but potentially more profitable things like silver mining stocks. And when you do that, buy the good quality names first. Then move on to the juniors if you have some more money after that. The juniors are potential 10-baggers, a lot of them. In other words, they'll make 1,000% for you if they work out, but they don't all work out. So you use them with your speculative money. And then, you know, the ETFs along the way, you know, PSLV can be something that you buy at any point in this process, because you're just basically adding physical silver to your portfolio, stored remotely when you do that. And that's basically it.
Could we see silver shortages and a subsequent silver boom?
Yeah, there's a very good chance that a shortage of silver develops for a couple of reasons. One is the industrial demand is growing dramatically, while mine output is not. So to the extent that we're going to slap solar panels on every roof in every sunny place in the whole world, they all use silver, solar panels, and electric cars use silver, and microchips use silver. So the world as it's configuring itself out there is really hospitable for silver as an industrial metal. And let there be a lot of investment demand. At the same time, there's all this industrial demand, and you could easily see silver just really hard to get, where you go to your coin dealer or call up one on the phone or whatever and say, hey, I want some silver coins. And they say, well, you're going to have to wait about 6 months. Give us your money now, and we'll try to get you some silver at some point down the road. And you don't want to be desperately buying silver in that kind of an environment. So the possibility of a silver shortage should lead you to take care of at least the physical silver side of your investing plan sooner rather than later.
We'll have more with John Rubino right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
You're listening to SilverRadio.fm. Available online at HowStreet.com, TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with John Rubino. John, does the price of silver rely heavily on the value of the U.S. dollar?
Well, for Americans it does, because we're buying silver with our dollars. So to the extent that the dollar is doing well, silver gets relatively cheap in dollar terms. And when the dollar starts to fall, then silver gets relatively expensive. So you want to take advantage of the quote-unquote strong dollar periods to do your silver buying. And we're kind of in the middle right now. This isn't a strong or weak time for the dollar in terms of a lot of what's going on out there, at least in terms of silver. It's weakening dramatically versus a lot of other commodities and things like houses and healthcare and commodities or college tuition, stuff like that. The dollar is falling dramatically. So we're in an inflationary period except for silver. So I think now is actually, given what else is happening in the world, is a pretty good time to use dollars to buy silver, just because silver is kind of the laggard, like we talked about, in the commodity space. And that won't last because there is no reason for silver, no fundamental reason for it to be lagging copper or aluminum or anything. So its time is coming in terms of spiking, and now would be a pretty good time to use dollars to buy silver.
Do you have a target price range for silver in the long term?
Yeah, not in the short term. There's no way to know what anything is going to do in the next 6 months. I'm sorry. But in the longer term, there's a very simple formula that gets silver up to $200 an ounce US. Gold goes up to $5,000 an ounce. Silver goes to 50 ounces of silver per ounce of gold, and that brings you to $200 an ounce. So, and that's easy. That's an easy thing to happen. So, I see silver as going to $100 for sure, at least $200 by the end of the cycle, and possibly more. You can't discount a parabolic move to something much higher, because we've seen that happen in so many other things lately, right? Half the cryptocurrencies out there have had straight up moves in which they went from a tiny number to a much bigger number in no time at all. And we've seen a lot of other things have huge runs, lumber, copper. Was it platinum or palladium? One of those two just took off and had a huge run lately. So there's no reason why silver can't do that. And if it does, then you find yourself well beyond $200 an ounce. But I think before that, you and I would be having these conversations about maybe it's time to lighten up on silver, convert silver back into dollars, just because at that point it's just, you're just being greedy if you hold on to a lot of silver beyond $200 an ounce, because you will have made a lot of money on that run-up.
Are you surprised the price of silver hasn't taken off yet?
Yeah. But then I'm surprised a lot of the time about things not happening as quickly as they should. Things just happen more slowly than you expect a lot of times in life. And this stretch with silver is just one of those times. But what should happen usually does end up happening. And silver going up dramatically is just something that is eminently probable. You know, it absolutely should happen in the not-too-distant future. So I'm not in any way worried. I'm still a buyer of silver at this price, very happily. And I totally expect it to go up dramatically from here over time. I have no idea about the next 6 months, but over the next period of years, 5 years, 10 years, silver should go up dramatically.
Are there indicators to watch for that might predict an explosion in the price of silver?
Well, yeah, that shortage that you mentioned earlier is something that would send silver through the roof right away, and you can kind of get a sense of how that's shaping up by looking at the silver stocks out there, not equities, but the amount of silver that's available on the exchanges and is owned by the ETFs. And right now it looks like PSLV, which is the Sprott silver ETF, is growing dramatically. In other words, it's taking a lot of physical silver off the market, while the COMEX exchange and SLV, the silver ETF that is run by JP Morgan Chase, are dumping silver onto the market. So if the PSLV trend continues, and it continues to soak up, or in other investment band or whatever, continues to soak up silver stocks, and that buying exceeds the amount of silver that's coming onto the market, then you'll get a tighter and tighter market that will lead to higher and higher prices. So watch those statistics out there. And that'll give you a sense for that kind of a trend in the supply of silver. And you won't be then surprised when there's a supply bottleneck somewhere that causes the price to spike, because you'll have seen it coming in the reports I was talking about.
If you're investing in silver stocks, especially the juniors, do you need to have a certain psychological advantage towards risk tolerance?
Yeah, and anything like junior mining stocks requires a really high tolerance for risk because they're really volatile. Rick Rule, who's basically the star of the junior mining stock field, likes to say that all the money, 110% of the money in that space is made by 10% of the companies. All the rest eat capital rather than create capital. So you need to be in that 10% that is succeeding and growing if you want to make money in the junior mining space. So, which also means that a lot of what you buy won't go down necessarily, even if you're a really good stock picker. You've got the odds against you with junior mining stocks. And if you succeed, it'll usually be because a couple of your stocks just went through the roof when the rest didn't do so well. So those 2 or 3 winners are really key. And in order to get them, you have to take some big risks, because it's not clear ahead of time to the average person which one of those stocks is going to be the one that just takes off. So you have to be prepared to be wrong about some things. And a lot of people just psychologically are not prepared for that kind of thing. They, losing all your money in the stock is a catastrophic emotional event for a lot of people. So, and that's okay, but if you're one of those people, you should be in the high quality names in the silver mining space to the extent that you're in them at all. The big good miners that, they might go up and down a bit when the markets fluctuate and everything, but they won't go away, and eventually they will probably make you some money. So that's the place to be. And another thing Rick Rule says about mining stocks in general is that you really don't need the juniors, because the good quality stocks in that space make a lot of money during the few years when everybody's into them. When everybody's buying them and the price of gold and silver are up and they're generating a lot of cash flow. The good ones make a lot of money too. So you can accept slightly lower but still great returns and eliminate a ton of risk by just staying with the big, high-quality names. And I think most people should do that. The speculating in juniors thing is kind of specialized, and you really have to have a high tolerance for risk and a willingness to do some studying to play in that space.
Could we see some kind of play by the Robin Hooders that affected the prices of stocks like AMC and GameStop happen in silver?
Oh yeah, there's an offshoot of that tribe that is all about silver. I think it's Wall Street Silver on Reddit, and you can just go there and see what they're saying. Their goal is to accumulate enough physical silver and hold it off the market to bring about a supply squeeze. And to that end, they're actively buying silver. There are a bunch of stackers out there. And to the extent that group grows and they do what they say they're doing, they hold that silver, they do not put it back on the market when silver goes up $5 an ounce or whatever. They'll add to the upward pressure on silver. They won't be the only force that's producing a shortage of silver out there, because you've got solar panels and a lot of other investors at the same time. But they could be the crucial piece of that puzzle that brings it about sooner rather than later. And there's no reason why they won't attract a bigger and bigger following as time goes on, because it's a great idea.
Is it a lot easier to manipulate silver prices than it is gold?
Silver is a much smaller market. So, yeah, it doesn't take much for some big player in the futures market to go out there and just smash silver. To do that, though, two things. One is they've got to short it, which puts them at risk. So if the market turns around on them because a supply shortage happens while they're out there shorting paper silver, they can be destroyed by that. And you know what? That would be great to see. There aren't that many people in life that I wish to see destroyed, but the guys manipulating the silver market are right up there with telemarketers from my point of view. Let them all die painful deaths, at least from a financial standpoint. But that could happen. So they're taking big risks, and someday they'll get run over by physical demand. And when they do, they will actually make the price of silver go up more, because they'll have to cover their shorts, which means they'll have to buy at any price in order to avoid going bankrupt. And that will just add rocket fuel so that's called a short squeeze. And that will come. That'll be part of the parabolic move, when the shorts get squeezed out by rising prices and then have to cover their shorts, which gives the market that last little 100% pop, and the day is coming when that will happen too.
John, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Jim.
My guest has been John Rubino, author of several books on the economy, including The Money Bubble, his website, dollarcollapse.com. If you have any questions for John or any of our other guests, we'll ask that question for you the next time we talk to them if you send it to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Comments made on silverradio.fm are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at howstreet.com, talkdigitalnetwork.com. Silverradio.fm is a production of House Street Media Incorporated. Executive producer is Tom Allen.